Scratch that. It's continue. All right.
He's trying to go back into the past to undo the mistake he's made and forcing us to watch this movie.
All right. Take two. Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we continue a retrospective of movies featuring Jules Verne's immortal creation, Captain Nemo, with the 1969 UK MGM adventure film Captain Nemo and the Underwater City, starring Robert Ryan and Chuck Connors. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen this movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. And I know some of you are like, I'm jealous of the people who have not seen it. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of this winter's Young Captain Nemo. It's why we're doing a bunch of Captain Nemo movies. From Fievel and Friends Macmillan Children's Books. In Los Angeles, Adam Foshko has worked on some of the most successful interactive franchises of all time, whether it's Call of Duty, Destiny, Skylanders, Shrek, Transformers, or James Bond. Adam's work with these stories, characters, and worlds has helped set them apart and continue to delight millions. Say hello, Adam.
How are you tonight? Thanks for having me.
Outstanding. I'm so excited. I swear to God, I'm so excited to talk about this crazy, crazy movie. So welcome back. It's been a while. You and I have not been on a podcast, I don't think, since we were doing the Tiki podcasts in the summer.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure we've ever had this particular combination, have we?
No,
surely we
I don't
have.
think so. I don't think so.
Adam and I have been on a podcast together, but I think that Jason wasn't hosting that
possible.
time. I think it was Drew and Julia and Adam and me. That was what it was. It was really weird. It was fun.
Oh.
I think I was driving cross country or something at the time. Something weird was happening.
Yeah.
Whoa. If you think of the show as being like a deck of cards, right? That is an unusual selection.
Hand.
Actually, that's a strange hand. That is a weird hand to have
It's
Drew
all
and
jokers.
Julia.
All jokers.
Okay, then you hear that voice, and from the Rio Grande Valley, David Bowles is a Mexican-American author and translator from South Texas, where he teaches at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. His latest book, They Call Me Guero, was just selected as a Walter Dean Myers Honor Book for Outstanding Children's Literature. A whole bunch of awards just sort of keep coming in. And in April, just a few weeks, Penguin will publish his novel, The Chupacabras of the Rio Grande, co-written with Adam Gidwitz. Say hello. Hola, David. Good to have you back. I'm so excited that you're here, dropping in just before you head out on a book tour on the Chupacabras of the Rio Grande. That sounds like super fun, and I'm
going to be fun. Yeah.
Also in Denver, as always, color comments from attorney Joya Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello, Joya. But the funny thing is, Julia and I are just exhausted. We've been there's been book related stuff this weekend. Our teenager had a play, so we were doing
other
that
teenager
whole thing.
Had a tournament. Yeah,
there was the tournament, and so it's been sleepless and exhausting, but great. Parenting is its own reward. That's what they tell me, and so
this has definitely been the good side of parenting this weekend for sure.
No, it's all been lovely. I'm very proud. So okay, guys, I'm so happy that you've come back, and I'm so sorry that this is what I've foisted upon you. Although I think that there are some fun things to discuss. I swear to God, I think there are. Captain Nemo and the Underwater City. I challenge anybody to actually remember having seen this film, but it's an expensive movie to look at. Captain Nemo and the Underwater City is a 1969 British film starring Robert Ryan, Chuck Connors, and Nanette Newman, and Lucia Paluzzi, who was one of the James Bond girls. It features the character Captain Nemo. It is inspired by 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and not a little bit by Mysterious Island. And it was written by Pip and Jane Baker, who were a major pair of Doctor Who writers. And we'll get into it, but it's basically about, very similar to Mysterious Islands, about some guys who get shanghaied to the world of Captain Nemo, and they have to decide how they're going to escape. But it is very different because we'll get into it after we get our opening thoughts. Suffice it to say, Nemo is a very different kind of ruler here before than when we saw him last played by anybody else. So let's get Julia, David, Adam, and then I'll go. Try to restrict your opening thoughts to about 2 minutes, and because then we're going to get into it and just go through the whole thing. So Julia, opening thoughts, Captain Nemo and the Underwater City.
How this movie was not nominated for an Oscar, I'll never know. No, I'm kidding. It is not the best film that we have seen. It's very colorful. I love the colors. That was the same thing I said last week too. I love how they use colors in these old films, and just everything is so brilliant. The plot confused me. It was definitely something that I was like, wait, and we'll talk about that. But I had a lot of questions. The politics are a little problematic, I think. But there's some interesting things that there's definitely it has some strong moral ideas.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be a fun one to talk about because there's so much going on there. But I think that's about all I want to say right now.
All right, David. Yeah, we've got some guys who get shanghaied into a utopia run by Captain Nemo. I don't know if you've ever seen this film before, but what are your thoughts?
No, I'd never seen it before, and my thought is that I try to imagine being a moviegoer who just a few months before this film had seen Robert Ryan in The Wild Bunch and came to see him in this like wooden, dull, monotone interpretation of Captain Nemo. Just man, it must have been mind blowing. He's a good actor, but he's not doing a particularly good job here. There was a couple scenes that I liked, but for the most part, I just didn't like his performance very much. And he wasn't, served very much by a plot that largely, restricts him to holding forth and being a dick.
Yes.
So yeah, it's. But I mean, there was some interesting miniature work. The design of the underwater city was interesting. There was some attempts at doing sciencey kinds of things as plausible as you'll get in this kind of a film in the 60s. But like the bumbling brothers, I could have done without.
Oh God!
There were things that just made it almost intolerable. It began in the weirdest way possible with like no kind of grounding of the characters in the midst of the storm. You don't know who's doing what or who you're supposed to be rooting for, and
why their ship is sinking.
Why? Yeah, their ship doesn't appear to really be in any major danger, and everybody's like running off of it. And you just get some really badly dubbed lines of, "Oh, she's breaking up, she's sinking," and you're like, "I'm looking at her, and she's not breaking up, and she's not sinking.
The camera's not even shaking.
The ship, the bell on the ship is not moving. I mean, what?" So, but just because, like, if I could imagine, this film with a few scenes at the beginning with the senator being sent off, and just giving some kind of, especially for the characters we're supposed to be rooting for, seeing them before they get on the ship, and just taking 5-10 minutes to just set them up, put them on the ship, like the movie Titanic. Maybe not as much time as it takes, because that's like one of those intermission needed kind of films, but
Sure.
Something along those lines where you feel for the characters. And I get it. This is like 60s filmmaking, and it's like, let's do it quick and let's get in. But again,
You're right, though.
Continue to compare this to The Wild Bunch. There's a film that just came out a couple of months before with one of these actors that does take time with the characters, and you do get to know them before. Even though there's like an action scene at the very beginning, you do take time later on to get to know them. And I just think that that's not done here. And you really don't even get a sense for who these characters are until like halfway through the film. And even then it's really, really sketchy. And so there's never any moment where you're like really, really rooting for Senator or whatever the hell his name is to get out of the underwater city. There's just no urgency. It's just like people going, "Oh, I hate it here. I want to get out of here." And and Captain Nemo saying, "No, I am the dictator. You stay because I don't want you to reveal to anybody where I live." And not that anybody could fucking get down there in 1865 or whatever the year this is.
Right.
I don't know what he's so worried about. according to the like implausible line, they are 10,000 fathoms. They're deeper than that deepest trench in the ocean, right?
Yes.
Which
Yeah,
how
Mariana
they're
Trench.
not, the Mariana Trench, yeah. So it's a mess, and there are a few things that I enjoyed about it. It wasn't like I didn't want to blow my brains out, but it was hard to stay awake for the first half hour, and afterwards it was just hard not to like roll my eyes at a lot of the inanity.
Adam, what are your opening thoughts? Similar, different, along the same lines?
Well, while everybody was watching the first moon landing, these people were making this picture. And I tell you, I mean, I've seen a lot of movies. We have sat through many a Eurotrash picture. We've sat through great movies. We've sat through terrible movies, and I think we're sort of saying similar things. My main complaint about this really is. First of all, I think it rests solely with the script. You could say that it was cheaply made because the miniatures are not that great. But the point is they actually spent a lot of money on it. They spent a lot of money really on the Undersea Kingdom parts of it. I mean, the money went into the effects, went into a lot of things like that. But we could blame the director. We could do a number of things. But it was a product of its time and a product of the studio in the UK at this time. And I think you can really point to the script and the fact that it doesn't really flesh out these characters. It doesn't really set them against each other in a way that you even take a movie like that is kind of cheaply made in places, but something even like Master of the World, and with Vincent Price and sort of a Nemo-esque sort of character, but in the air. And this is he had a very particular position, and he and the characters in there were taking great risk, and they were set against each other, and it was there was actually some drama. The problem here is there's so little drama, so little real risk, and so little real anything. It really just becomes a sort of the camera is running down here in the Undersea Kingdom, and this is what's happening. This is a film that I thought I had never heard of. It's almost like that's the camera running.
Well, actually, now that you say that, it seems like I like the idea of it being like a reality television and underwater
and
kingdom.
That's completely fine. You go, it's got the social angle that the first officer is jealous about the newcomer, and this is very normal. The new guy in the house attracting the attention of the girl in the house, and the guy who's been there a long time and that was trying to help him leave the house. I mean, this is like reality TV, and not much more than that. And the problem with it is, I think the fact that there's an opportunity, that we kind of know at least the Nemo character, and we know kind of what he stood for, what he stands for, what we think he stands for, and the different portrayals. So I think there are a couple ways to look at this picture. One is standing on its own merits, and there's some things that I think are good about it, and there are some things that are not so good. And I think the things that are not so good largely are is the story and the script and how the movie unfolds, and how it doesn't really go very far. And then you look at it, but it has merits. It got made. It's really hard to criticize a picture that got made and made money and did whatever it did, right? Particularly at that time. This is a big risk for a studio picture, I think, at that time. Here's what it's going to be. Special effects and these people, and they had to put, Connors in it, who was an American working in the UK. Some people were clearly under contract. Some people were like, Connors sells tickets. He's in the Rifleman. It'll be fine. They were trying to, create an audience for this. And they even included, you could tell when they wove in the two bumbling brothers, even the music themes that would come in when the bumbling,
very Disney, don't you think?
Greedy brothers would come in. I mean, they were meant to. It was meant to be like a 4-quadrant picture at the time, where it would really it would appeal to multiple people, because it was going to be in the theaters. But if you compare it to the other stories and pictures that are, and Jason, you're a much sort of greater judge of this than I am, but the other Captain Nemo characters from other stories, like how this stacks up. I mean, it's an interesting thing. Like, it's almost like they neutralized the Robert Ryan character to sort of keep him from being, too sort of unhinged or too controversial. And the problem is, it came out. It really sort of became this collective meh.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're all sort of reacting to. So, I'd like to say again, gee, I'm sorry I missed Mysterious Island, because that really would have been the thing. And I really thought I had not seen this picture, and then I realized quite literally at the midway through that I had seen it. And what's funny is, when you sit and you watch a movie and you can go, and you can almost guess what the next beat is going to be, and you say the
Yes.
thing that the character says, you know you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And that's where I was. It was like, oh, you know, see the machine that makes the gold? How about right now? Oh no, he's taking him right now. Okay, here we go. And that's the problem. It's not because we are a cynical bunch, because we are. It's really because look, we love some terrible stuff, but we love it for kind of a reason. It's really hard to get behind this as either something that is a great movie and took a lot of risks, or is a terrible movie and took a lot of risks, because no risks were taken.
Yeah.
And that's the real problem. I think any of us, I'm speaking for the group because I can't resist, and you can all jump on me in a second, but I think that's the real problem, that it feels like the studio got involved early or got involved late, and pretty much flattened the mountains and raised the valleys to where there was a sort of a fat band of, this will delight the kids, and it really didn't move the needle in any particular way. Nothing really happened, and it was not even really a big sweeping adventure, and you left, you went, oh, that was a good way to spend an afternoon, I guess. I don't know, but it didn't really move the needle, and I think for that reason you feel like there's a missed opportunity, and that's probably the thing that I'm responding to most. And that it felt like, oh, we could have done something with this that could have been really, really interesting, even for its time, because it wasn't like there weren't controversial or even, deeply dramatic pictures. You even take a film like, take something like Dr. Doolittle, and as colorful as Dr. Doolittle, Rex Harrison, as colorful as that is, it's a much more fanciful, interesting movie than this. And the timeline isn't that different, but it's a similar kind of, they're trying to reach a similar kind of demographic. Anyway, that's all I have for my opening statement.
I never saw Dr. Doolittle, but I remember people didn't respond all that way. But in my mind, having not seen Dr. Doolittle, nevertheless, if you were to ask me to group this with stuff, I would definitely group it with that. This sort of gloppy, extremely colorful, plastic, flights of fancy kind of magical world.
A product of its time, yeah.
Yeah, and because I think there was also one of the films. Oh God, there's there's several like Magical Valley films of the period where people go on an expedition and find this wondrous world of flowers. And yes, it's not quite Technicolor; it's something else, and it's just this. This thing goes mad with color. And you talked about like the musical trills that play whenever the brothers who both carry the weight of being the comic relief and also the moral lessons of the film. They have these little leitmotifs that play that are straight out of 1960s Disney. They're like characters that you would see on Zorro, on TV, and it's interesting. To David's point, and we should go right into the beginning of this film. To David's point, the movie lacks an act one. It really, the act one is the ship. So a modern movie today, you would have like 8 or 10 minutes setting up each of these sets of characters, which is to say the mom businesswoman and her son, Chuck Connors, the American senator, and the two venal thieving brothers, all of whom are getting on a ship and headed on across the Atlantic to Great Britain. And then they all get into this shipwreck, and then and they skip all that stuff. We just go straight to the shipwreck. You're right. You just nailed something really important. But they knew how to write an act one even in the 60s. So I have no idea why there's sort of no introduction for all these characters.
Well, I think they put their money into, it's all in the Undersea Kingdom. That's really what everybody came to see. Didn't necessarily matter. You could say, look, it didn't really matter where who was whom in Act One. It was really it could have been a random choice of people. It's just that it matters when you put them in the lifeboat. It's sort of like that's I think I could think of vaguely in my mind other movies that may have started with, look, they came from all over. We didn't know who they were, what they were doing, but it's because they survived that made them somehow important. Fate chose them as these people.
Well, Lifeboat actually is exactly the way you mentioned. Yeah.
And that's a thing which you can kind of go, okay, and the discovery of the characters is something that you do, throughout the course of the opening act, and it gets more complicated in Act Two. But there's there's so little that happens with it. They could have done it that way, but they would have had to intensify everything and sort of like bring everything into sharp relief and do a lot more work to really make that pay off. And they could have exactly done it the way you're saying, and it would have been a much more traditional movie. But they didn't. They didn't do it there.
I almost feel like it was an afterthought about the shipwreck. They were like, I guess we should have a reason why these people have shown up on this. Like they just kind of let's talk about a thing.
What's fascinating, usually it's Nemo. I mean, historically, Nemo was the one who would sink ships, particularly if they were warships, and then I guess he would collect those people, or maybe not. But I mean, the fact is that it seemed very odd that everybody died, I guess, or they got away in the other boats. I don't really know. And then these people didn't, but they were saved, and then they were taken to the city. It's like, well, you kind of left with the
we're given the impression. Nemo says, and let's talk about Captain Nemo. But what's going on in that opening scene? Nemo says later, let's do less expeditions up to the surface. So let's presume that he was doing one just then. And so they saw some people fall out of a ship, and they decided to be good citizens of the sea and rescue them. However, if you get rescued by Captain Nemo and taken to his underwater city, you become his subject. You're never going to leave. That's just the deal.
His prisoner, really. It's not just a subject.
Let's discuss Captain Nemo. So this is, first of all, this is an alternate universe, I guess, from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Mysterious Island. For one thing, in Mysterious Island, remember, the events of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea had happened. And, but Captain Nemo had survived those and gone on with the Nautilus and rocked around the Pacific Ocean a while, and then had received some damage, had beached it on an island where he started doing some experimenting with making animals real big, and then he dies in that adventure. This movie posits, I guess, that the events of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea occur, but it doesn't really matter. We don't know. But we can presume that those events occurred, right? And that would have been about 30 years ago. And then what appears to have happened is, instead of doing Mysterious Island, he goes to the Atlantic Ocean and appears to build a giant dome city underwater. And then here's the amazing, amazing thing. He built a giant dome city and then got a whole generation of volunteers who shared his words, shared his vision to come and live in this city under his benevolent dictatorship, and have families.
And the timeline is even weirder than you're letting on, Jason, because Joab, his second in command, who, I mean, if we go by the actor's age, is like in his mid-30s. Says that he has never been to the surface. He has lived his entire life down there. So
he was born in this city.
Exactly. So, but the Civil War is still going on, which was going on during 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea as well. So,
was it? Wait a minute.
So are you saying
going on during Mysterious Island?
The plot? Is that what you're suggesting?
It was. Wait. I just want a clarification. I think the war was going on during Mysterious Island, but the war was not going on. Maybe it was. Was the war going on during 20,000 Leagues?
What happens in the 1860s? So, like, all three of these movies are happening in the 1860s.
So these are just alternate universe Captain Nemos.
There's
just no other.
Don't do the math. Don't do it. Just stop.
Now let me just point out, Jules Verne himself knew that he in his novels could not make head nor tail out of Captain Nemo's timeline. He couldn't do it. He actually includes a ridiculous circular footnote in Mysterious Island that says, well, as noted earlier on page so-and-so, there are some ways of understanding this timeline. But you go to page so-and-so and it says, there's a little bit of an inconsistency, with the timeline here, and it's circular. That's clever. That's,
it's like paradoxes on Doctor Who, where they're just like,
yes, it's like, So, but okay. Robert Ryan.
Wait, I'm sorry. The answer is there are two brothers. There's there's Captain Nemo, and then there's like his younger brother, Phil Nemo, and they went to two different oceans entirely, and they had kind of a rivalry going on. And Herbert Long was one, and then there was this one.
Actually, you may be onto something though in trying to, because I'm going to do my best to try to understand this as though it were real. But
that's why he's not a Time Lord of some kind.
Here's the thing. Robert Ryan appears to be playing Nemo as though because let's presume, by the way, that Robert Ryan has commissioned all of the clothing that everybody wears. So he says, I'm going to build a dome city under the Atlantic Ocean, and all my
In the
officers
1830s.
in the 1830s, and all my enlisted men are going to dress like British sailors, and all my officers are going to dress like I guess British officers, and wear black tunics and big epaulets, and then sometimes we'll just go a little wild with the epaulets.
Sometimes we'll wear Liberace style sequined outfits, and for sure we're going to have lots of gorgeous Victorian dresses lying around for women who may show up and need some.
Yeah, but the everyday women, they can dress like Paradise Island. I got no. They'll be,
and the kids can be naked. We don't need children to have clothing.
No,
Yeah.
They can just
Why
be
dress
nude.
children? Seriously, why waste clothing on children?
It is so funny that this is his vision, and just imagine that. I just find it fascinating that he would have, if we were to take the movie seriously, which I know is a terrible statement, but if we were to take it seriously, it means that this guy showed up maybe to a giant shipyard that he owned and went to the whole community and said, building a dome city, who wants to come? And they're all like, fine. And he's like, okay.
I'll come with you, Jerry Maguire.
Right, and they'll be like, he'll say, but just so you know, I'll have a few officers, and I'll call all the shots, and but you won't really have to do a great deal.
You can never leave.
And you can never leave. And they were like, huh? That appears to be what has happened. And apparently it works great. He has a utopia, and it can only be brought down if you are exceptionally greedy or have another major character flaw, which apparently until the moment that these Americans arrived never happened.
That actually tracks.
I mean, I find it fascinating. I just sort of, I don't really, the reason I guess that I find it fascinating is that obviously it's only here so that you guys said it right. You're supposed to look at the amazing vision of the underwater city, and not think too hard about the nature of this world, because this is a seemingly much more lovable Captain Nemo than either of the ones seen in the prior two movies, but he also wields much more power than the others.
Here's what I think. Not knowing about anything about the producers or the directors, I'm going to guess that a set designer and a costume designer got together and said, let's make a movie.
Right.
And that's what happened.
That's certainly possible.
The underwater city, it's a silly vision of an underwater, and I'm not knocking it because it is kind of fun. David said that he was falling asleep, and I think there's not enough happening, so you can kind of tend to, like, even though it's a very short film, you can tend to fall asleep. But it is an interesting vision of what I can only sort of watch it with a certain level of detachment, right? Because we're so far back from its release. But this is what was intended to just make audiences sit up and go, wow, in 1969. And to begin with, there's automatic drink dispensers. There is this city, which I guess is the size of like Disneyland. It's not really clear like how big it's supposed to be, but it's like a small village kind of giant city under a dome. And there's lots of places to swim, and there's cotton candy. The band seems like a 19th century band, wearing like red coats and everything, and playing French horns and what have you. The parts of it look like a revolving restaurant, Didn't you think that? Like some of the places where they have the little tables and looking out the window and stuff, it is an incredibly 1960s sort of vision of how awesome Victorian stuff.
It's sort of like a Disneyland-esque kind of.
Yes.
If it was like a Disneyland under the sea, with except that one pool and the shark nets and the,
Or a cruise ship. Maybe a cruise ship.
A cruise ship, yeah. It's the early sort of Carnival cruise.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very. I guess what we're saying is it's okay. It's like an interpretation. It's almost like it's a superficial version or superficial vision. As gilded. I'm not going to say it's lush. I'll say it's sort of colorful in a weirdly
I like that gilded.
And then gilded which is partly, I think, the sort of the Victorian or Edwardian, whatever that time period.
Edwardian
I guess
comes next, like, yeah.
Whenever the Sun King is in France.
All right, and then of course everything needs to be gold to make the the morality play work. But I mean, it's all very kind of gilded, and there's a lot of design. I think on a superficial level that all kind of tracks, and I think you see it even in the very beginning when they're brought on board, the Nautilus, and they're in the sick bay, and there you can see it's extremely ornate. There's even the hanging berths where they're sort of being seated and given shark liver juice or whatever, and it's you begin to see it there, and you see it kind of blossom. I'm trying to think in terms of time, because Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. I mean, every time I saw this, I was like, oh, it's like looking through the lens of Irwin Allen, with the Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, which was a giant between Sea Hunt and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. And I think there was another movie that I got this initially confused with. I think it was sort of like, what was it? City Under the Sea? City Underneath the Sea? Was that it?
I haven't seen a lot of City on the Bottom of the Ocean kind of movies, but
there's one other.
Voice of the Bottom of the Sea, the TV show was going on about now, I think.
Yeah, and I think there was the Walter Pidgeon movie with the inexplicably dressed Peter Lorre.
Yes.
Throughout that, the only officer in the Navy who has his shirt untucked. And then there's another movie which is basically The City Underneath the Sea, which is a much more modern mid-70s sort of like post Planet of the Apes sort of. And gold plays a really weird role in that because they're moving Fort Knox, the gold from Fort Knox to the city, where agreed morality play happens as well. Surprise, surprise. But it was American made. But what's interesting is this particular one. I think it just doesn't have any of the elements that you sort of expect to play, but it's got all the. I think it's almost as if they said, the undersea action is like really exciting to people, and there used to be a shark fight kind of somewhere with this, and then there's the giant monster, which
there's a full-on Japanese style kaiju monster.
But all of this is tied to. It's all gets tied back to Nemo, which is so weird. Even he says, "Yeah, we created this thing, in this utopia." And they could sort of manage all that. It really is just the people, which seems to sort of make the argument, makes his own argument. And humanity will just somehow destroy itself. And even down to the, it makes the argument. And is this the only Captain Nemo movie where Nemo isn't somehow critically injured or doesn't die or something because he is so driven, he's so mad with whatever it is he's.
Well, I mean, because remember, this movie kills everybody that thinks is immoral. And we'll talk about in a second, but as much as Captain Nemo basically holds everybody's lives in his hands and refuses to let them, and he's
but
he's very sensible. He's like a very sensible Nemo.
He'll it's interesting. He's almost an objectivist sort of Ayn Randian kind of figure in a way, because he's like, I will dominate everybody. I'll tell everybody what to do. And then he kind of falls intellectually in love with Chuck Connors, where he'll and this is consistent for all stories of Captain Nemo. Every Captain Nemo story, Captain Nemo kind of has a sort of brain infatuation with some smart guy who's not as smart as Nemo, but he can take him under his wing and kind of teach him all about his stuff. And that's Captain Nemo's greatest weakness, is he's Batman and he wants a Robin. And so here he kind of takes Chuck Connors, who's really brilliant and leaderly and yada yada, under his wing and shows him all this stuff. But and Chuck Connors says, well, I'm duty bound to end up following my own will. And Nemo's like, that's the way you got to go, man. I'm totally down with that. In other words,
I'm doing the same thing. So
I'm doing this right. And, so he will dominate everybody who except for those who will not be dominated. And that's pretty, it is pretty consistent, because look who dies. The greedy idiot dies. The greedy guy who is a little weaker willed does not die because he turns his back on the greedy guy. The fearful guy dies. Does anybody else die who oh yeah, Joab
the first in command dies because he succumbs to this jealousy.
Yes.
He dies for the sin of jealousy.
Right.
Yeah, that's Joab.
But Nemo does not die. because
Oh.
his sins are completely invisible to this movie. That the movie just cannot seriously indict Captain Nemo for anything at all that he does, which is hilarious because he is a straight up dictator. There's
Yeah.
there's no doubt
Can you
about
imagine a version of this film where the senator gets to know people who are kind of disaffected in the kingdom, who are kind of chafing under
it.
the
Yeah.
dictatorial rule, and like together, I mean, and they're the ones who help him break out, and they're escaping together, and it becomes
Like
Oh, I love
not just
an
about
underground railroad type of thing.
yeah, and it becomes not just about Captain Nemo chasing after his Robin, but like, legitimately trying to put down his revolution and
Yeah.
a
Right.
civil
Nemo
war
wants to
within
build a
his
wall,
own
and
paradise.
then
He could build
there's a Russia probe, and
It's a
there's
that actually that to be honest, that does seem in keeping with the way that the James Mason and maybe the Herbert Lom Nemo could be presented. You're totally right. And you even would have seen plots like that on Star Trek. Everybody
Right.
here is
This
happy,
is what I'm
happy,
saying
happy, happy.
that would be if they involved a writer in the making of the movie instead of just the set designer and the costume designer.
Yeah, and the set designer who apparently got a truckload of like gold spray paint
Gold
and
stuff.
decided
Oh my
yeah,
God, that's my
spray
mom.
paint
If my
everything.
mom had set designed this movie, this is what it would look like. My mom
Yeah.
loves to spray paint stuff gold. It's her
Oh
favorite
my
thing to
God.
do.
That is
She calls
that's
it.
really
that's amazing.
She calls it goldening things.
Yeah.
I
It's a
golden.
very very Liberace-esque sort of production design.
yes.
Yep.
I once again, I just have to say this movie looks so much like Paradise Island. I think if I were a kid, I actually would think it looked super cool. Now I think it looks super cool in the sense that I also think that lots of things from the 1960s look super cool, and it's all from a
No, I
from a
saw it as a kid. I think I saw it as a kid,
oh,
and I remember feeling like I was being manipulated by the director and the bad script, and I was really young,
yeah.
and I just didn't buy the two brothers. And then I was like, I
Oh,
think
the
again
comedy.
because I saw it probably around the same, maybe around the same time as Mysterious Island. I felt like it was a lesser movie,
Yeah, it's
and I was
clearly
a
a
kid.
lesser movie, and look how much more is in it, right? There's like 7 people in Mysterious Island, if that. And whereas this movie has a cast of hundreds,
It
and
starts with a balloon.
yeah, and it's the I was just thinking about how it fits also into a bunch of stuff, and then like there's things it shares with stuff like Fantasy Island and things like that, or of course, like I said, Paradise Island, where everybody dresses in the sort of Greek thing with the golden.
Look! You can even take it a step further. Right? You can even go around the not too dissimilar time period was the George Powell version of H.G. Wells' Time Machine with Rod Taylor and Yvette Mimieux. The Eloi, lived in a perfect sort of idyllic world, and then you had the Morlocks, and all these things. You had the Victorian man who was ahead of his time, who now goes to the future, and then he's a man out of time, and he has, it's a story you could follow. I mean, so what's interesting is that is a superior movie because the script is superior.
Yeah,
and there's a sense of adventure that runs through it, and there's no sense of adventure that runs through this movie at all. You could take, I would
are
even
they
say
related, Adam? Like, is the problem that, as David points out, the movie, it doesn't occur to the movie that there's something wrong with this city, and so therefore a movie like that, Rod Steiger has to try to escape, and we're on his side, and he's going to find flaws with this Utopia. Here, the
Yeah.
Utopia really does seem to be Utopia, and Chuck
So,
Connors, the best the movie can say is Chuck Connors has got to do what he's got to do, and so
Chuck Connors, think about it, Chuck Connors, the American,
right,
has to leave. This is a UK production as well in the late 1960s or 97, 69.
Huh.
I think it would be interesting to sort of dig into it and see if there's any sort of you could say that maybe there's a political undertone that runs through this, but really I think we'd probably be reading too much into it. I think it was trying hard to not push really buttons very much, to really I think it's escapist fare action on the surface, because even the action stuff is not, it's got the trappings of adventure, but it doesn't have the actual, doesn't move the needle at all.
Yeah.
And there are other cheaper underwater movies that actually have more adventure because nothing's at risk. There's really nothing. They're not invested in the characters. You're not, Captain Nemo himself actually has done a pretty amazing thing. And actually, the people who are trying to upset Utopia probably shouldn't be trying to upset Utopia. You're sort of, you kind of buy into that, and because of that, you're going, well, actually, yeah, I agree. End of movie. It's not really, and
I don't
in the
know.
end, the American, American escapes with the other guy, and the other guy learns a lesson, and neither one of them are affected particularly either.
Yes.
It's a very odd thing. All the other movies that we could probably talk about of the time had more things to say. I think the problem is, it was really hard for me to find out what this movie had to say.
Yeah.
It was showing us a lot of things, but it didn't actually take a position. I mean, it said a lot of things that even could be politically charged, or certainly reflected certain views at the time, or you could even today, there's an echo of that you're getting now. You're kind of going, is Nemo enlightened for the time? Are we better now? But I mean,
yeah, is Nemo enlightened at all? It's unclear. I mean,
but I think the questions of this film are: if you, because the premise is that, like we've said, somehow he got some people at the beginning to come down with him and create this world. Now everybody there only knows this world, but if you know a different world and you want to go back to it, and you're not allowed to go, because if you go, you're going to tell about where we are, and we don't want anybody else to know where we are, because it will ruin everything.
Isn't Lost Horizon that same story somehow? But
that was the movie I was trying to think of, Lost Horizon. Yes.
Yeah.
Which somebody said basically the 1960s version of Lost Horizon appeared to have been filmed in the lobby of a Holiday Inn.
So I want to say the
Wow.
question is, I think if you want to go deep with it a little bit,
that's an indictment.
The question, I think if you want to go deep with it a little bit, the question is it best? And this is a question I struggle with all the time when we talk about like our political opinions. Like, do you rather have your little Facebook friends list cultivated down so that you only see people who agree with you, and it's like you kind of feel like, okay, we're all reinforcing each other's ideas. That's kind of what we do. Or do you want to invite outside points of view and outside perspectives, and maybe risk there being some discomfort and conflict, but now at least you've widened your worldview. So they're saying, we want to keep our little utopia, our little bubble, literally a bubble, and not let anybody else in, but we feel like we have to rescue these people, so we've let them in. But now they have to stay because they cannot go back out and risk us being discovered. And then these two guys at the end do get away, and they choose not to reveal who these people are.
They don't. In fact, they're not given the opportunity to. They just say
no. They have the opportunity. They have the opportunity because they have the gold ladle, but they choose to throw the gold ladle back in the sea.
They're using that as okay. I suppose that's true. I suppose that's a true statement.
I think because they could have been like, if you don't believe us, there's like so much more gold where this came from. Then they'd be like, wait, what? Gold? What?
It's hard to pony up with a ladle and be kind of like, there's plenty more where this came from. It's like more ladle.
It's made of gold. Have you ever seen a ladle made of gold? No, especially in the ocean.
I think the thing is that the indictment. Speaking of indictment, the indictment. If Nemo is guilty of anything, it's the fact that he has created an undersea kingdom, and during the time when the U.S. is torn apart by civil war and people are dying of cholera and whatever else, and he's managed to build a city, some 10,000 fathoms underneath the surface of the ocean. Yet they can still scuba dive.
Yes.
Whatever. But
yeah.
But no, I'm not going to look at that. But my point is, and they say it in the movie, right? And he's not willing to share his knowledge, his discoveries, his, clearly whatever he's managed to do, with the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really kind of his great sin, I suppose, if you want to call it that, because he says he's so adamant about the fact that humanity is unsalvageable, except for his people and the few that he has now rescued and brought in. But humanity is not fit to benefit from his discoveries and the work that not just he did, but also the people and the families that sort of were a part of this. He says it really kind of right up front, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And the weird thing is, the movie pretty much says, yep, he's right. And, everyone's gonna sin.
Which is
the Garden of Eden was a wonderful place too until sin made its way in, and then there was the fall of man. And it's going to happen. And again, it's better that but maybe there's some hope, because you've got the American who knows about this and escapes because he believes in his principles, even though someone dies in the process. But he is going to keep the secret, and maybe they will meet one day as equals, or they will work together in some way. Does this mean that I'm trying to read Ryan's face in the beginning of this and the end of this, and as reading the letter, and it's like, well, is that the spark of possibility for
No
top
way.
side humanity, where it's kind of like maybe the senator that I was
The
having
cynic
trouble
over
with
here.
actually is. And then then they elected Trump.
Yeah. What was your
Right.
thought,
So
David?
I was going to say, and it's interesting that you ended it that way, because I'm going in that general direction. So watching this, 40, 50 years later, it's hard not to see this whitewashed version of Captain Nemo, as most Captain Nemos were at the time, in this underwater city that no one can get to, and it's populated by white people.
Yeah.
And he is chewing out a northern senator who's trying to stop people in Europe from supporting the South, and telling him that the war is stupid and da 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 da. It's hard not to watch all this through that lens, especially as like a Mexican American creator right now, in 2019. And I know that, like, obviously no one was thinking of those things, at least not consciously, when they were putting this movie together, but it is glaring. And the movie's lack of desire to interrogate any of those kinds of things, and it's like tacit, like, thumbs up to Nemo's underwater white paradise, far from any people of color, with like miles and miles of water between them, is just something that a modern palate has a hard time dealing with. It's not
right.
a film that has not aged well. It's really, really hard to watch it. It really is, frankly.
You wouldn't fix
for
that,
those
David,
reasons, as well as just being
just by
kind of a crappy movie.
introducing. Oh, I apologize for
No, go ahead.
I mean, I was just thinking, I think you're on the right track, and I think it's so damaging that just introducing more diversity would not fix it,
Nope.
because it's about this. I called it Ayn Randian, and I think it's very much like that vision of some people are just good and can solve stuff, and a few of them are going to go live in a valley, and like everything's going to be great, and that's what's going on here. It's funny though, because Nemo is like, I'm super smart and I can make all this stuff, and I'm going to go build a giant city, and it's going to be awesome, and we're just going to grow a little bit and make bigger domes. It's fine. And it's
I
all
love
white people.
his grand vision is, okay, nobody else has
More
seen
domes.
this. Nobody else has seen this, but check it out. This tiny dome light that lights up is where we are now. But look, there is a slightly bigger one that also lights up. And oh, wait, this is the kicker. Not only is there an even bigger one that lights up, but there's going to be like 5 more of these.
And then a big dome on top of all of them.
Exactly.
Right.
The dome that unites them all.
Which is so completely just
And the mom is like,
mind-bogglingly
she just
absurd.
like falling apart. She just falls apart. She just loves them so much.
Okay,
That
I
would've
want
been
to talk
interesting,
about
too,
that
to
in
see
a
him, like,
second.
yeah, to have like a romance with her. It's so weird. But he's
Yes,
like
okay.
he's way too hung up on Chuck, though. I mean, he's like, he's got his bromance going on. So time for romance.
No, it's true. Okay, hold that thought for just a second, because just to pursue this a little bit longer, his deal is, I'm super smart, gonna create this. I really think somebody here is like high on Atlas Shrugged kind of stuff, because the only thing is, though, it's like Atlas Shrugged plus benevolent, like, socialism, because he's like, actually, though, if you come and live in my underwater city, I'll make you my officers, or you'll just hang out, or I guess do whatever. I presume he's set up committees to solve all this crap, right? And you'll just have everything. It's just communism. As long as everybody just doesn't question Captain Nemo, everything will be fine. And what is hilarious, you called it the thumbs up, is the people who are making this movie are like, sounds good to me, because everybody's going to love Robert Ryan. So yes, Robert Ryan is so... God, there's a problem of what this character is supposed to be like, and the fact that he's being played by a wonderful actor named Robert Ryan, who looks bored out of his gourd. Just completely, like, what do you want to do, Captain Nemo? And he'll go, well, they hate you now. that happens. And he's just, and yes, he's got a love affair going, or whatever it is, with this woman who is 25 years his junior.
Well, to be fair, like you pointed out, Jason,
What?
nobody else
What?
is close to his age, so he kind of has to go with.
Well, yeah, the whole damn city is actually
It's
full
called
of.
the Nemo curve. Come on.
Yes. Is the whole film, the whole city is full of women dressed in like Greek, dresses, who are hot, and but he hasn't really shown any interest in any of them until a woman who argues with him, which is to say, a widowed businesswoman from the United States. No, she's British. She is British. Shows up
Right.
and argues with him, and he likes her. So, are we to presume? Who knows? Is this the first girlfriend he's had that in the city? I don't know. I mean, and like David, you said
Maybe.
it. We should be hearing from all the citizens about like what the hell is up
Well,
with
no,
the
we
prince
don't
and this
know.
girl.
No, we don't know that other people haven't just died, because the fact is, people die of all kinds of things. So he may have had a girlfriend at some point, or a wife or something, and she's gone now. She died.
Well, he did have
Of
if
boredom.
we
A
presume that.
convenient shark
boredom.
accident.
Did you say out of boredom?
Yeah.
That's funny.
She's like,
I
there's
mean,
no Act One.
In the book backstory, his wife died. He had a young wife when he was a young prince. So imagine, whitewashed is right. Imagine again that this is an Indian prince who spent some time as an international terrorist and now has settled down to run a utopia.
He basically built his own suburbs under the sea.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it all rocks and yeah, I can kind of see it. But if that's the case, if it's, I've closed my heart because when I was young, I had a wife and she died, and that's why I turned against humanity. But you've made me see something or other. I actually would have enjoyed that stuff. I don't know
Yep.
why the scene's not there unless everybody was like, nobody wants to hear Robert Ryan read those lines. I don't know. I really
And
have no
there
idea.
was the closest we get is when Nemo realizes that Helena has that she knew that the senator was going to escape
Yeah.
the day before,
Yeah.
and she didn't tell him, and he just like gives her this withering look, like, and she's like, oh snap, no, I mean, I didn't know that he was going to steal a submarine. He just told me he was going to leave. Don't be mad at me. Like, it's starting
It's
to
like
click between you
betrayed.
and me.
Yeah.
And they
And-
kind of
and-
like make up a little bit later on. I mean, they get along better later on.
Oh, sure they do, because Joab saves her ass. Because there is some sexism in this Nemo too, and he
Wait,
you know,
what?
when
There's
Joe-
sex?
yes. Well,
Yeah,
first
I
of all,
know, it's
none of
really
his
hard to
officers
believe.
are women.
You probably didn't notice it, Julia.
No, I didn't. I just thought we were like in the in the 80s when women were like working girls.
I mean, even in
Oh yeah, that's right. Joab gets electrocuted, and he's like, "Nah, dude, this is on me.
this is
Don't
on
blame.
me.
Don't blame the chick. I did it. She's good."
And so all is well because a man told him
Yep.
that he could
Yep.
trust the woman. That is uncool.
Yeah.
Also the fact that he says, "Tell me, woman," or something. Like
Yeah.
suddenly he's Tarzan. Oh dear.
It's terrible. I mean, there are parts you just go, no, come on, don't, no. Oh, you just did that. Oh, fine.
Not even in 1969 was this necessary, guys. Come on.
No.
Yeah.
Well, but also think how we've watched a lot of like independent small movies that fail in one way or another, but we'll go, what's really cool here? This relationship's really neat. That made me think of something cool. Any of those things, right? And there's just sort of not a lot of that going on here.
No.
And like in West Side Story, which is a wonderful movie, they've got a female officer, member of the gang, who is just, you could spend hours talking about her because she's so strange. She wants to be, is she a trans boy? What is she? Everybody talks about her as though, she's happiest when they call her a boy, right? And there's all this interesting stuff going on with that character. And you could spend forever debating her. There's nothing like that here. There's no, basically he's completely like, women just have no place in his crew. And that's, I don't even think. I think it's so obvious, and even probably. I apologize. Probably a little boring to talk about because obviously it just hasn't even dawned on these guys that you could have a woman wearing one of those black outfits and ordering people around, which is just strange. Because I should point out, by the way, that Majel Barrett already played such a character in the pilot of Star Trek, which was
oh yeah, when she was number one or whatever.
number one, and that was like
and she's
2 years before.
And number
this.
one is on Discovery now, by the way. I don't know if you know that.
Is that
Yeah,
so?
but what's interesting, in this movie, and they did have, there was the girl kills the shark, which is sort of interesting, and like at least they kind of were like, oh, she's actually extremely capable.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Yes,
I'm
sorry.
They do, but
yeah.
in the same breath, they also do that. They go, oh, if she were born here, Connors was actually rather impressed by it. I mean, yes, it might be in service to make her attractive to him,
Connors,
but
yeah.
I mean, she did do that, which is interesting. And you go, oh, all right, so you're not blind to it. You're just sort of doing it intentionally,
which is worse. It is worse. Again, why doesn't she wear a black outfit? Why is she dressed like every other nymph in this city and is doing
kill sharks and teach children
and teach children and babysit, and just truly wow. She's neat, by the way. I wish I had seen this character more. She played a James Bond girl in Thunderball, and she was around in a bunch of Italian movies in the 70s, and I just looked her up. Lives yet, 81 years old. Italians live a long time, so how awesome for Lucia Paluzzi. Yes. So what does that leave us with? We've talked about Nemo and how this Nemo he's simultaneous. Here's the most frustrating thing, by the way, David, and from what you said, the tacit thumbs up, is that this is the first movie I've seen where Nemo is just as bad as always, but the movie doesn't realize it. That's just really fascinating. That's
we're all like, yes, we would love to have a benevolent dictator, mining gold from seawater and just giving us whatever we want. He can be a dick all day long. Just give us what we want.
Just give us what we want, and it'll be fine.
Keep the brown people away. Give us what we want.
It's fascinating.
Let us swim. Yeah,
that is just fascinating.
Jason pointed out that the fact that everything is gold and they don't even know that gold has value is like when it rains donuts on The Simpsons, and in one of the Halloween episodes when Homer's just zapping around different realities, and then he gets to this reality where he's like, "Oh, this is perfect. This is almost exactly like the one I left." And then he goes, "Can I get a donut?" And they're like, "What are donuts?" And he's like, "No!" And he runs out and goes to the next reality, and then it starts raining, and it's donuts. But they just call it rain, and they're like, "Yeah, this is not." Super
funny. There's, I should mention the Nautilus, of which there are two Nautiluses in this movie, and a sort of a clumsily introduced problem with the second Nautilus that makes their escape attempt doomed, although they do manage to survive. But it's a neat design. Basically everybody at this time is struggling with how to make a version of the Nautilus that doesn't look anything like the version that James Mason had in the Disney, which is tough, because how many ways can you design a submarine? As long that that everybody kind of has the idea, I want a fin kind of thing. I want it to sort of have fins and a suggestion of undersea life.
Doesn't look nearly as cool, though. I mean,
No, this one does look more. It's not as sleek. It feels more boxy. And the inside, once again, we're back to. I don't care if this is super expensive. It looks like. Did you ever go to the buffet at Disneyland that was right next to the entrance to Adventureland? I'm trying to remember now what it was called. But
back when, like how long
back
ago was this?
Like 8 or 10 years ago. It's closed now.
Adam's like, I've been to everything Disneyland ever.
Yes. I kind of have been, so I'm trying to play. Keep going.
Anyway, there was this sort of like Main Street ice cream parlor kind of looking buffet, and it had the same sort of curlicues and wallpaper and all this stuff. So the bridge of the inside of these submarines is once again presented like something out of Hello Dolly. It's this sort of it's just crazy that everything here is designed to look like late Victorian Edwardian stuff. And I guess that's clever, but the problem is in the process of doing that, it makes everything look tall and boxy, like they're in a restaurant or something. And that's not cool. It never gives you the impression that they're actually in a submarine.
No, of course not. And it's so spacious. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Forget the window in the front.
Plus, right. Plus, there's a window. Yes.
Well, that's but remember that was the thing at the time too. It was an Irwin Allen conceit too, and it was like, I'm sorry, Seaview needs a window because Seaview.
Right.
And never mind, all the other stuff like
Oh,
but look, the Seaview looked like a ship.
Speaking of the Seaview, we haven't talked about the one thing that almost makes this film Castle of Horror worthy, except for the fact that we're only doing this film because it ties in with Jason's book release, which, by the way, just got released this week, the Young Captain Nemo book. But were it not for that, we would not be doing this film as part of Castle of Horror. However, there is a giant sea monster.
That's right.
Yeah, let's concentrate on that for a moment.
It's
that was driven mad.
Yes. It was something like they were doing some experiments and they like bonked it on the head and it went crazy. And I think they call it something like mobula. And there's some scientific reason why they wander around to calling it mobula, but that's a nutty like Japanese giant monster kind of name. And they end up killing it by spearing it with the Nautilus, and that's how Senator Fraser wins the approval for the newcomers from the people of Templemere, is that he aids in killing the giant creature. Well, this is all very much in keeping with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where they have to fight, because that's a moment, actually, come to think of it, because the Canadian Ned Land saves Nemo's life during the battle with the giant squid. And because Ned Land saves their life, Nemo has a new respect for all the newcomers. So interestingly, that's a beat that is just straight up borrowed from 20,000 Leagues. The difference here is that Chuck Connors is playing both Professor Aronnax and Kirk Douglas. So that, and then you have a couple of idiots. There was nobody like these people in the
right.
The brothers.
Well, it was better done. I mean, let's face it.
Yes,
the story was better.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I wanted to mention about the Seaview that if you look at the design of the Seaview, it's spacious, so they can have actors running around, but it's all silver. It looks like the inside of a submarine. I mean, the Seaview really feels like the Navy.
Come on. It's nice to The thing is, I think they really intentionally made it look like they weren't just getting like pieces of Hello Dolly and making it and then tying it in. I'm sure that stuff was around, but somebody intentionally was like, it's got to be 1800. It would be curlicues and design and gilded and wood paneling and kind of whatever else. And there'll be those moments when we'll do something high tech, but it has to still be done within the the milieu of the 1800s. I think it was extremely intentional. But then if Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea was always meant to be with the flashing panels and the sparks and the kind of whatever, very much like some version of.
Yeah, you're right.
Having been on a submarine, I could say it looks nothing like the sea, but it's just nothing like this. But it was some version that was exciting. You could sort of buy into the idea this is some sort of big experimental kind of something or another. But again, it's got the moon pools. I mean, these guys have moon pools too, where you basically it's the thing of water that basically is there's enough air pressure that apparently keeps the water at bay, and you sort of dip down into it and then out the bottom.
Yeah.
Which is I always found fascinating as a kid because I was like, well, is that really a thing? Does that really happen? Can you really do that?
Yeah.
And they certainly make use of it here. So it's using that same sort of tech, that same sort of idea. but it's I think they very much intentionally made it look like it was the 1800s, and I think that was I could forgive that in a lot of ways, and I never for once expected that this was supposed to look like a submarine. I mean, let's face it, Nemo's even the Mysterious Island Nautilus has all kinds of curlicues and gilded things. It always seems like it's very much like his own personal kind of home with lots of flourishes and everything else. The only one that maybe didn't seem like that, I'm going to close my eyes and just say this because I can't resist, is the film version of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. When you look at that Nemo and his novel,
yeah, that's true.
Which is I cringe generally about that movie, but we're talking about Nemo, and particularly as a prince, as an Indian prince. And then having the Nautilus. So it's that looked more like a working, functioning, mechanical submarine more than an opulent, Gilded Age piece of showboatery.
Yeah.
But,
said.
That's all production design and what people would sort of tolerate. I would have preferred a better script over a better looking novel.
Yeah, I agree with you.
That's a really good point.
I don't know. I can't say I would prefer one or over the other because I really enjoyed looking at this movie. I think it's really pretty. I think it just would have been nice to add a script.
Yes.
Add a script writer
I
to
suppose.
the
Well, and I think David named right off the bat one of the best ways is if you could just introduce more of some independent thought from the people of the city, or maybe some diversity, or talk about that, or maybe the diversity is too much to ask for the 60s. Hard to say. Who knows?
Right. It probably is, yes.
But because that was tough, but a few people were doing it very well. But at least some questions, at least some questioning. So I think we've probably pummeled this one about enough. I think we should get our final thoughts, and then any sort of endorsements that you might have. Those of you, Adam, I know you wanted to do Mysterious Island because you love that movie. So I apologize that I instead foisted this.
It's the bait and switch. It's fine.
All right, so let's get our final thoughts on Captain Nemo. That's just such a silly title. Captain Nemo and the Underwater City. I say that, but I could actually do something called Captain Nemo. Just you watch. I might do a book called this. All right, so it was Julia, David, Adam, and then I'll go.
You'll probably make it good. I don't know.
Thank you. We will certainly try. All right. So, Julia, final thoughts.
Well, I'm going to say, as part of my, I know it's not endorsements time, but as part of my endorsement, I'm going to say that Jason, in fact, has made it good with the Young Captain Nemo book. So everybody go out and get that one.
Because there is an underwater city. That's true. I forgot. Yes, there's a whole dome. There's a whole dome city actually in a lot of that book. Yes,
exactly.
Of course there is.
Yeah. So that was fun. Let's see here. I think we've covered most of what I was thinking. I do like, the more we've been talking, the more I've been thinking about what would have made the film better. Because my initial instinct was just having any kind of plot would have made the film better. Having any reason why the ship breaks up, having any reason why they don't, well, not any reason, but a better explanation of why they've decided to cut themselves up. But I guess that part makes a little bit of sense. But anyway, the more you've talked about it, the more I'm like, oh yeah, I guess we could have done a lot with because I just kind of assume with films like this that the default's going to be sexism and white, not just white privilege, but white privilege to the exclusion of everybody else. Yeah, exactly, erasure. So now I'm like, well, it didn't have to be that way because there have been films that we've watched where I've been like, wow, this is really cool. There's this female scientist who doesn't have any she's no different. It's like they wrote a character that was a scientist and they just happened to cast a female. That they could have done that here with one of the characters. They could have explored some more of the people who are being more forced to do things that they don't want to do or forced to be there. Maybe they did want to leave. Like there's always a possibility for a plot of somebody who's like, I don't belong here. I'm not an underwater person. I'm a land, an aerial, who's like, I want to be where the people are. So that's there. Those are all interesting thoughts. So yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of interesting places this film could have gone, but I'm sticking with, I like looking at it. I like the golden curly cues. I like the gold spray paint. I like the purple clothes and the sequins and the epaulets. I just think it's fun because it's such a fantastic. It is very Disney. It is fun to look at. So that part I enjoyed very much.
Thank you very, very much. David, what are your final thoughts on Captain Nemo and the Underwater City?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with Julia. There's a lot of time spent on things that are not particularly useful. We could have edited out some shots of the seal slapping its flippers together.
Yeah.
Do not get rid of the penguins. The penguins are adorable. I don't want to get rid of the penguins.
The penguins that was only like 10 seconds, so that's okay.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what they say in the studio screenings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More penguins.
The one thing that we really didn't talk too much about was Lomax's really bizarre, first of all, his bizarre motivation for wanting to get away because he's claustrophobic. That's really basically it. Although he's an engineer, he should have been obsessed by the city and wanted to stay there.
Oh,
and
no,
then,
I'm claustrophobic, and I really related to that guy. I was like, oh my God, I would probably have to kill some people too to get out of there.
Yeah, but I mean, and then he's flooding the city, and he does not have a tank or anything nearby for him, and so he gets closed up in this Charlie from Lost moment. The viewers of Lost will remember what I'm talking about. Charlie dying.
Yeah.
Sealed off compartment. So yeah, it's a seriously flawed film that's interesting to look at, and has just a couple of interesting scenes and just a lot of potential. Something definitely for somebody, I don't know, who's maybe writing books about this milieu to mine for ideas for much better storylines. So hopefully, a dear friend of mine will be doing something like that in his series. But yeah,
Adam, go for it.
Adam, the new video game. Adam has already he's one up.
What?
No, we're just imagining you one-upping Jason and already having. We're so awesome. Adam, Jason's book comes out, and the day after that, Adam's new video game comes out, Captain Nemo. Yeah, so I mean that's it. I really don't have much else to say. Just a lot of wasted potential. It wasn't a horrible thing. I could see what they were going for. They didn't care about any of the stuff that we care about. They thought they were making a kiddie film. They were like, yeah,
I guess that's true.
Around the world in 80 days, just flashy fun. That's what they thought they were doing.
Yeah, the thing about that though is, I mean, not to. I mean, I know you're wrapping up your thoughts, but
yeah, no.
Around the world in 80 days, 5 weeks in a balloon. Again, films like that, similar insofar as that they are. You can see some of the check boxes in the same columns are fulfilled. But those are actually more about. I mean, the stories are stronger and they're actually about something, and they have a sense of sweeping adventure. They have a sense of of drama. They have a sense of excitement. They're sort of lacking this not sort of like a political drama, sort of in your own head with no real risk. And that's the thing. If they were trying to go about making a 5 weeks in a balloon or Around the World in 80 days, it didn't quite have the sweep. It didn't, the romance didn't really blossom. I mean, that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
It just became a very staid,
right. And a lot of this is the typical,
which I think we've all said.
Right, and this is the typical, MGM producer Stephen Palos was the guy who kind of came up with this idea. The original story had been about a floating city, which would made a lot more fucking sense. And he read articles about Jacques Cousteau's underwater adventures, and he's like, "Oh shit, let's make this underwater, put it as the city on the bottom of the ocean." And it's the typical just some whiz bang ideas a producer has, and you grab a couple of writers and have them throw it together, and boom, let's film it. And it's this kind of thing you see all the time in Hollywood. So I'm not particularly surprised by it. It continues to happen to this day. While perhaps better projects are languishing in development hell. So we all know what that's like.
That's really true.
And that's all I have to say. Done.
Good. Mr. Adam, what are your thoughts?
Oh, look, I think I've said about all I'm going to probably say about this movie, except, I think it's easy to point at the screenwriters and point at the director and kind of say, look, it just didn't do enough. But really, I think it's it feels like this is a movie that people were under contract. People were, they got people to, they got Robert Ryan to be in it. They got Chuck Connors, so they wanted him. And, it fulfilled a particular space I think, in the development portfolio. It didn't have to do a lot more than it already did. I think they didn't have extremely high aspirations for it. I think that they kind of felt this was a formula picture that you can tell from the underwater scenes and the action of those things, and they kind of they put 2 and 2 and 3 together, and they said it has all these different elements in it, Captain Nemo, and Voice Around with the Sea and all these different things, and it all it has to do is be this, and it is that. They probably made exactly what they set out to make, and it's fine. I think that's probably the greatest flaw with it. You could say it's fine. I don't know, if I think about 1969 audiences on a Saturday afternoon paying 35 cents, which is, I imagine, what a movie ticket cost back then, sort of for a matinee. Send your kids to this. It's what's a film that came out a little bit later? Island at the Top of the World, which was, I think, was a Disney picture. This has a lot of lesser elements. It's a lesser movie. It doesn't have the sweep, but it may not have really needed it. So, I mean, what we're really sort of looking at here is, again, we said it each one way or another, is sort of unrealized potential, because A City Underneath the Sea is cool. Captain Nemo is pretty cool. The different times that we've seen the Nautilus, kind of interesting. Having the real opportunity to have a political drama writ large with action, and have it make a statement with great effects, and have it be something that, had romance, had action, and it had, strong characters. Kind of cool, but it doesn't really introduce those things, and it doesn't really deliver on those things. Instead, it relies on some slapstick and some it's unfair to say cardboard characters. It is unfair to say that, but I think characters that don't particularly have strong motivations and are not fully realized. And when you look at there's the sort of the A story of it, and you're trying to get a sense of the B and the C story if there is one, and it's just sort of there's not a lot of depth. Ironically, in a movie about an undersea city, there's no depth. So the problem is that it doesn't really feel like it sticks to you at all. It doesn't really move anything. And so now, even looking at it, it was probably fine in 1969, or even if it was replayed later in the early 70s. But looking at it through, I don't know, the same eyes that I think probably, certainly I'm speaking for myself when I say I saw Mysterious Island and was moved to not only be enthralled by science fiction and fantasy, but Harryhausen and filmmaking and storytelling and all of these things. That was a thing that really caught my attention. And it had its flaws, but it also was captivating. The problem is, again, a movie about people being captured, not captivating. It's a deeply ironic movie, it seems. But I think that's probably the biggest problem with it. It's fine, but it's merely that. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, I would add nothing to that. I think you guys did a wonderful job of taking this film apart and being aware of the opportunities that were lost. I'm really glad we had a chance to look at it because, as Julia mentioned, I've got A City Under the Sea in Young Captain Nemo, so it was kind of cool to look at this film. This was one of the ones, when I was doing research on everything that Captain Nemo, how he had been presented, this is definitely one of the ones I watched. And another one that I watched was Return of Captain Nemo, which is an Irwin Allen picture from 1978. And I have to tell you right now, I cannot remember a thing about it. So maybe it's many times better, and maybe it's not. I don't know. So maybe that will be the next one. I'm not sure. Let's do endorsements. I don't know if I will have anything by the time we get around to me, because to be honest with you, it's been a super busy week and I haven't had a chance really to watch much of anything. But I'm curious if anybody has anything that they want to share that they've been reading or watching, or anything that is super important to your heart that people find out about. So let's see. Julia, were you first? It was Julia, then David, right? So Julia, do you have anything to endorse for us this week?
I've already been endorsing the Young Captain Nemo book by Jason Henderson.
I feel terrible.
Who's that guy?
It's so sweet.
we just did a little book release party today, so that was fun. Because that came out this past weekend and people are enjoying it very much. So that's one. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything that I got into this week that I hadn't already talked about before. No, I don't think there's anything I'm particularly excited about. I've enjoyed there's a new show called Whiskey Cavalier with Scott Foley
Oh yeah,
that
that's
I've
good.
watched
Yeah.
a couple episodes of, and it looks fun. It's a little, it's basically the same kind of adventure show that we've seen over and over. The catch here is that it's an FBI person partnered with a CIA person, and I guess that's different. And then Scott Foley's character is kind of pathetic at least at the beginning because his heart has been broken, and so he's emotional and he's processing his feelings. So that's a little bit clever and funny. But mostly it's just if you enjoy that kind of show where they're getting into all kinds of adventures, FBI and CIA style, week to week, then you will like that one.
Mr. David, do you have anything to endorse for us?
So recently I've watched 2 series that I was getting caught up on because not everybody, many people had raved about them. So one of them was Russian Doll, which is really, really good. And I mean, after seeing Happy Death Day or whatever,
Yeah.
part 1 and part 2, I was really kind of dubious of anybody doing something, innovative and like captivating with that premise. But the series is incredible, so I really, really highly recommend. It's on Netflix. And then the other thing, because my wife made me get like that the YouTube like membership so she could watch some show, I decided to watch Cobra Kai, which is the continuation of the Karate Kid films, and I cannot believe how good that series is. It is so perfect, so funny, and like just perfect. Everything is like the best you could possibly hope for. And it and even seems like it's erasing the bad taste that Karate Kid 3 left in everybody's mouth. So it's a really great, engaging TV series. I can't wait for season 2 to come out in about a month. So
do you think taking the time for a TV series, David, is what is the secret? Like giving all those characters time to breathe.
I think so. It really,
yeah.
really made me like I could imagine like a an hour and a half, hour 45-minute version of it that would have rushed through a lot of the character beats and just would have felt like just like a retread of the first film. But this one does the callbacks in such like a perfect way, and like you begin rooting for the character of Johnny, which is like and like feeling. And it's only halfway through the series when you really start getting into Daniel's life and understanding like the things that he's going through, and it's nice. It's everybody's really complex. There are no villains. It's just like people grappling with the complexities of their own lives, and just lots of really great music and fight scenes are fantastic. It's I can't believe that it's on YouTube. It's really good. So, and then a Nemo related thing. Watching this movie reminded me that I want to dig in, and I'm gonna like look for it now. But do you remember there was a Japanese series from the '90s called Nadia: The Secret of Blue Water? It was an anime.
Yes.
It was based on a concept by Miyazaki. He came up with it, and then the guy who did what was it called, Evangelion or whatever? It was like one of his first series that he directed, and it's basically like a side story where like Nemo rescues these people, but we really follow their story. And I remember renting from Blockbuster like a video of a couple of episodes for my daughter when she was like little, like when she was like 4 or 5, and she was really into like Totoro and films like that, and just like being struck by the episodes that I watched with her. And I just started thinking about it. I want to go back, I want to track it down. I bet I can find it online or something. But yeah, Nadia: The Secret of Blue Water. If you want some animated Nemo Japanese goodness, that's the place to go.
Wow, good tip. Very good tip.
Awesome.
Mr. Adam, what do you have anything to endorse for us?
After that, I got nothing. I have a stack of things I should be watching, and ask me another time.
All right, very good. I have been just under it this week, and I have nothing, so I'm going to leave it at Nadia: The Secret of the Blue Water. I would be foolish to try and add anything to that. So that brings us to the end of. I cannot believe we got an hour and a half out of discussing Captain Nemo and the Underwater City. This was a very interesting film. Someday we'll have to rank bad films that we liked discussing and bad films that we didn't so much like discussing. And this one will come somewhere in the middle, because there have definitely been movies where we're like, I just have nothing to say here. And that's not the case here. This one just feels like missed opportunity. Nevertheless, God love Robert Ryan. Rest his soul. He was a very interesting performer, even if he's not at his most interesting here. So we will be back next week. I don't know what the movie is, but I will be letting y'all know soon. Have a fantastic week. If you are enjoying the show, leave a review on iTunes, because it makes a big difference. It helps people find the show. Come to the Facebook page and tell us anything. Tell us we were completely wrong about Captain Nemo and the Underwater City, and you can.
I dare you.
I will. I personally will I will commit to engage with that conversation, and if it's and we might even drag David and Adam into it if they're listening and like, wait.
Notice he was too smart to say, make Julia respond to.
Yeah. You'll tag Julia all day on that, and she will not respond.
Well, thanks, Adam and David, for pinch hitting.
Thank you so much for being on, guys.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
I'm so happy to talk to you again. Have a wonderful week. I can't wait to talk to you next time. Bye.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.